I still remember the exact moment my entire life stopped feeling real. It happened in the middle of a crowded backyard surrounded by people I had known for years, while cheap country music played through outdoor speakers and everyone laughed like it was just another normal Saturday night. One careless sentence from a drunk man shattered more than 20 years of marriage in less than 5 seconds. Ever since that night, I have not been able to look at my wife, my friends, or even my own memories the same way again. My name is Daniel, and until recently, I genuinely believed I had a good life. Not perfect, but stable, the kind of life most men work themselves into the ground trying to build. I had been married to my wife Melissa for over 2 decades. We raised 2 kids together, built a home together, survived financial struggles together, and grew older side by side. We were the couple people pointed to as proof that marriages could still last. Looking back now, I honestly do not know if any of it was ever real, or if I was simply the last person too blind to see the truth. Melissa worked as a social worker for most of our marriage. Her job involved working closely with local law enforcement, especially in cases involving domestic violence, child protection, and mental health interventions. Because of that, many of her coworkers and professional contacts were police officers. Over the years, several of them became family friends. We invited them to barbecues. We spent holidays together. Some of them came fishing with me. One of them even helped my son learn how to drive. I shook these men's hands countless times while they smiled directly in my face and carried secrets that could have destroyed my life. For years, I never questioned any of it. Melissa often worked late hours or attended after-work gatherings with officers and department staff. Sometimes she would come home after midnight smelling like wine and exhaustion. Other times she would say they had to debrief after difficult cases, and I believed her because why would I not? I trusted my wife completely. We had been together since our early 20s. I thought trust was supposed to be automatic after that many years. The terrifying thing about betrayal is that once the truth finally cracks through, your brain starts replaying every memory differently. Suddenly, moments that once felt harmless begin looking suspicious. Innocent details start rearranging themselves into something ugly. It becomes impossible to tell whether you are discovering reality or losing your mind. The night everything exploded was during a 50th birthday party for one of our longtime friends named Rick. He rented out a lakeside property about an hour outside town. There were maybe 40 people there, most of them couples we had known for years. Several off-duty officers were there too, including some guys Melissa had worked with since the early days of her career. At first, the night felt completely normal. People were drinking beer around a bonfire while old rock songs played in the background. Melissa looked happy, relaxed. She wore this blue sweater I always loved on her, and for most of the evening she stayed close to me with her hand resting lightly against my back. If someone had told me that my marriage was hours away from imploding, I would have laughed in their face. Around midnight, I went inside the house to grab another cooler from the kitchen. That was when I heard them talking in the next room. A few of the officers were sitting around a table drinking whiskey and getting louder with every bottle. One of them, a guy named Grant, was heavily intoxicated. He started talking crudely about women, strippers, and stories from years ago. The others laughed while trying half-heartedly to quiet him down. Then I heard my wife's name. At first I honestly thought I misheard him. But then he laughed and said something about Melissa being wild back in the day. Another guy muttered that Grant should shut up before someone heard him. Grant just laughed harder and said not to worry because it was all before me anyway. The second he said those words, every hair on my body stood up, because I knew for a fact Melissa did not even meet Grant until years after we got married. I stepped into the doorway before I even realized I was moving. The room went silent instantly. Grant looked up at me with that drunk expression people get when they suddenly realize they said something they were not supposed to. I asked him what exactly he meant by before me. Nobody answered. One of the other officers tried changing the subject, but by then I could already feel something collapsing inside my chest. Grant smirked awkwardly and said it was just old stories and not a big deal. Then he repeated that it happened before my time with Melissa. I stared at him for several seconds, trying to process what he was saying while the other men avoided eye contact like guilty teenagers. I should have demanded answers right there. I should have lost my temper. Instead, I just grabbed the cooler and walked out because I could feel humiliation spreading through me like poison. The idea that multiple men in that room knew something about my wife that I did not made me feel physically sick. The rest of the party became a blur. I barely remember conversations after that. Every time Melissa laughed or touched my arm, I found myself wondering if one of those men had touched her the same way. I kept catching officers glancing at me before quickly looking away. The paranoia started instantly. My brain would not stop spinning. When we finally got home, after 2 in the morning, I confronted her the second the front door closed behind us. At first she looked genuinely confused. Then I repeated exactly what Grant said. I have never seen a human face lose color so quickly. Melissa went completely pale, not defensive, not angry, terrified. That reaction alone told me everything before she even opened her mouth. She denied it immediately, but the denial sounded weak and rushed. She kept saying Grant was drunk and exaggerating. I asked her directly if she had ever slept with him. She said no too quickly. I asked again. This time she hesitated. That hesitation destroyed me. We stood in the kitchen for almost an hour while I kept asking questions and she kept trying to dodge them. Eventually, I asked her one thing that finally broke her. I asked why she looked scared if none of it was true. Melissa started crying almost instantly after that. Real crying. The kind where someone cannot control their breathing anymore. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands covering her face while I stood there feeling like the room was tilting sideways. Then she admitted it. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Like someone slowly stabbing me over and over. She told me there were affairs during certain periods of our marriage. Mostly years ago, according to her. She claimed the stress of work, constant trauma from social services cases, and spending so much time around police culture created situations that blurred boundaries. At first she described them as emotional affairs. Then she admitted some became physical. Some. That word still haunts me because of how small she tried to make it sound. The more I questioned her, the uglier the truth became. She confessed that during the worst periods it happened frequently. Not once or twice. Not one stupid mistake. She admitted there were stretches where she cheated multiple times a week. I remember staring at her while she spoke and genuinely feeling detached from reality. 20 years of marriage suddenly started looking fake. Every anniversary, every vacation, every Christmas photo hanging on our walls. All of it felt contaminated. Then came the worst part. Some of the men were people still active in our lives. Men I considered friends. Men who came into my home and sat at my table while secretly carrying memories of my wife in their heads. I asked her how many. She refused to answer directly. That refusal told me the number was bad. I walked out of the house around 4 in the morning because I honestly thought I was going to throw up. I drove around for hours with no destination while memories kept replaying in my head like torture. Every fishing trip with those guys. Every barbecue, every laugh, every handshake. I started wondering if they secretly mocked me behind my back all these years. The humiliation was unbearable. What destroyed me even more was how normal my life had seemed before that night. I had no dramatic suspicion, no private investigator, no shocking text message discovery. I found out because a drunk man accidentally said too much after 20 years of silence. Over the next few days, I barely slept. Melissa tried calling constantly, but I ignored most of it. When I finally returned home, she looked exhausted and terrified. She kept insisting the affairs ended years ago. She swore she loved me and never intended to hurt me. But by then every sentence out of her mouth sounded unreliable. Because once someone lies successfully for decades, how do you suddenly decide which parts are true? I started obsessing over timelines. I would sit awake until sunrise replaying years in my head trying to connect dots I never noticed before. Certain business trips suddenly looked suspicious. Nights she came home late. Weekends where she claimed she was overwhelmed with work. I realized there were entire chapters of our marriage I could no longer trust. Then another horrifying thought entered my mind. Our children. I hate myself for even thinking it because I love my kids more than anything on earth. But once betrayal reaches this level, your brain becomes cruel. My son is 21. My daughter is 18. Suddenly I found myself studying old family photos wondering if they really looked like me or if I had simply convinced myself they did all these years. I cannot even describe how disgusting that feeling is. One afternoon I finally asked Melissa directly if the kids were biologically mine. She burst into tears immediately and said yes. She insisted there was never overlap during those periods. But again, how could I trust anything anymore? Every reassurance felt poisoned by the years of deception already sitting between us. What made it even harder was the behavior of the men involved. Not one of them contacted me after the party to apologize or explain anything. They just carried on normally like my world had not exploded. A few days later, one of them texted me asking if I was still coming to the lake that weekend. I stared at the message for almost 10 minutes trying to understand how someone could casually invite me fishing after sleeping with my wife. That text broke something inside me, not because of jealousy anymore, because of disrespect. The sheer level of deception required for these people to smile in my face for years while hiding something this massive made me question whether any friendship in my life was genuine. I eventually confronted one of the officers privately. His name was Travis. He had always been one of the friendlier guys in the group, and part of me hoped maybe he would at least show some remorse. Instead, he acted uncomfortable and defensive. He admitted there had been things happening back then, but claimed everyone assumed Melissa and I were unhappy during certain years. That sentence nearly made me lose control because at no point were we separated or openly struggling publicly. Apparently, they simply created a narrative that justified betraying me. Travis also said something I cannot stop thinking about. He told me I was not supposed to find out. Not supposed to find out. Like my entire reality depended on permanent ignorance. That conversation convinced me there were still things Melissa was hiding. People do not protect secrets for 20 years unless the truth is catastrophic. I began checking old phone records, financial statements, emails, and social media accounts. Every small inconsistency became another obsession. I turned into someone I barely recognized, angry, paranoid, hollow. Meanwhile, Melissa kept begging me not to destroy our family over mistakes from the past. She promised counseling, transparency, anything I wanted. Some days I believed she was genuinely remorseful. Other days I looked at her and saw a stranger who spent years manipulating me while I devoted my life to her. The hardest part is that despite everything, I still love her. I hate admitting that because it makes me feel weak, but love does not disappear overnight just because truth finally arrives. Sometimes I would look at Melissa crying across the kitchen table and remember the woman who stayed with me while I struggled through layoffs and depression years ago. The woman who held my hand during my father's funeral, the mother of my children. Then my brain would immediately picture her with those men, and the rage would come back. People think betrayal is just sadness, but it is not. It is confusion. It is humiliation. It is feeling like your memories have been vandalized. It is questioning whether your entire identity was built on lies while everyone around you silently knew the truth. A few weeks after the party, I found myself sitting alone at the lake house we were originally supposed to visit with the group. I went by myself because I needed silence. The water was perfectly still that evening, and for the first time in my life, I genuinely understood how a person could feel emotionally lost. I sat there thinking about how strange life is. One sentence overheard accidentally can erase decades of certainty. One drunken confession can transform your home into a place that no longer feels safe. The scariest realization is that I still do not know the full truth. I do not know how many men there were. I do not know whether it actually stopped. I do not know whether everyone around me secretly knew. I do not even know if the life I remember truly existed the way I believed it did. What I do know is this. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from discovering you were the only honest person in a room full of people you trusted. And once that realization enters your mind, it changes the way you see absolutely everything forever.